Hello, I'm back in the garage today. In fact, I've been in the garage for the last 2 days doing some race prep work for the Cheesemobile. It's been a little while since I last did a little video diary, so I can't exactly remember where we're up to, but the car's been through its post-build check, IVA, all those kind of nice things since we last spoke, so I will have a look around the car and we can go and have a look at a few bits and bobs as well as the race prep that I've been doing. Let's get going. So let's take a look inside the engine bay. Basically on my post-build check they did some rewiring, or they did some rerouting, shall I say. Apparently this is pretty common. Most people have to have a bit of rerouting to do. But all they really did, they tidied up, they moved these wires into a slightly different sort of order and position, and they rerouted the clutch cable a little bit as well, and added this sort of protective sleeve to stop chafing and things like that. It is a much better route that they've chosen. But they're relatively minor actually. They left most of my decisions in place. So actually I was pretty pleased with that, and they said it was generally a good build, so I was happy with that. They also gave me a bill, so it was obviously not that good. While we're in here actually, so part of race prep is you have to add a fuel takeoff valve, and here it is. It was relatively straightforward actually, so it involved obviously taking off, the fuel hose was previously attached in here. And this is a one-way valve, or a one-way socket, so you have to release it in order to, well, you have to use a screwdriver to release this. Basically one half of this little black circle here pushes in slightly to actually release the pipe from the engine inlet. So I'm not doing a very good job of getting the camera in there. For me, let me just go around this side. I have no idea whether this was the right thing to do, but I put a flat-headed screwdriver down into here and just gently pushed one edge of this, the far edge of this inwards, and then the pipe just easily slid off. Whether that's the same for you, whether your pipe's going in the same way, I don't know. But it was relatively straightforward to take off. Obviously there's fuel in there, so just be a bit careful and make sure your ventilators, make sure you've got some rag or something to take off any excess that spills. And then it was a case of working out how to reroute the fuel pipe so that you could get all these gubbins in. This all comes as one piece, sort of an S shape coming out here. And the metal body comes in two parts. So you have this central part with pipes coming out either side, and a screw-in valve. So under here there's the, let's see if I can get this off. Thought that was going to be easier than it ended up being. There you go. So that's the valve that they can use to actually take a fuel sample during a race meeting. So I actually had to reroute my fuel hose back into a different place to actually get it to seat in the right place. I hope I've made a sensible decision, but it's done now, so hopefully that'll be okay. Well, one of the rules that you have to comply with is to make sure that your 7 badge is actually on the outside of your grille, rather than on the inside where it gets supplied. It gets supplied there because IVA doesn't like it on the outside. So you actually have to take the nose cone off, which, if you've ever taken a nose cone off Caterham, you know it's a pain in the arse. But you take the nose cone off, and it's actually pretty obvious what you have to do then. There's two little black clips which are holding the two meshes, the mesh and the 7 badge in place, and you just undo that clip and reverse their positions. Do the clips back, put the nose cone back on. So there you go, that's the nose cone. I was speaking to a couple of the guys from last year's academy at Donington at track day, and they suggested making sure you put bigger washers on the mounts for your wings. I think they meant slightly bigger, and I probably have over-egged this slightly, but it was the only washers I could find that I had 8 of and that were reasonable. The other ones were just only very slightly bigger, and it's to stop them pulling through. Apparently with just the manual method, these can pull through quite easily, and then obviously you can have a wing hanging off which can cause you to be called into the pits for black flagged. So I've, at each of the mounting points, I've just put these big washers. Like I say, I think I've over-egged it, and I'm hoping I'm not going to be causing myself more problems by having them, but there you go, they're all over them. One of the bigger changes you have to do is the side impact bar. So as you can see, mine is now attached, and its seats. So we have one mount here, which is in the front roll cage mount. There's a mount under here, which goes onto the A-frame bolt, and then a bolt at the top here. This is a final bolt. This is supposed to be a cap head bolt, but again, the fixing pack supplied doesn't have a cap head bolt in there, so I struggled on down with a standard bolt. But a cap head bolt would have made that much easier because you can't get a socket in there. Now I've got some padding on, which we'll talk about in a second. I can't do anything on it, but there you go. So there are your 3 attachment bolts. The fixing pack has a longer A-frame bolt, so you take out the existing one and then you whack in the new one. And everything else was pretty straightforward. They give you a longer bolt for this front attachment point as well. Now that can, because there's a bolt coming in from either side of this point, there's one bolt going in there, there's one to there, you might have to adjust this back bolt slightly and sort of release it a bit to give enough room for this bolt to go in. Either that, or you can take a Dremel to the bolt to shorten it off. Either way, you want them both sides seating and sandwiching it well. At the rear of the car, you've got to add the high intensity rain light, which is supplied. So here it is. There is a Jubilee clip. Sorry, not a Jubilee clip. I don't know what you call them. A clamp. Here you go. One of these supplied in the roll cage fixing bag, which goes round the roll cage quite nicely and can be used. I was initially trying to get it round the central point, which would seem like a sensible place to put it, but the clip's not quite big enough to go around all of it. So I ended up making a compromise and putting it slightly to the driver's side, as much as anything, to make the cable reach the fixing point, which we'll talk about in a second. I don't know the official rules on where it's got to be seated, but it seems like it's in a sensible place. So let's hope that it is, and I don't have to remove it because it was a pain in the ass, as most jobs tend to be, don't they? Let's have a look where the wire goes. So I'm just tucking it straight underneath the boot cover. And I'm dropping it down just by the side of the fire extinguisher, and then it roots on round, and then I cut a little hole or indent into the fuel filler cover, and I just popped it down there. And when it goes and sits, basically you have to unplug the connections are all up here basically, so you have to get under the car, have a look around, but you unplug the fog light, so track the wire from the fog light, see where it's going into, unplug that, and then get your plug and plug it in there. Again, everything has a tricky, there's no space in there, but eventually you'll get it done. While we've got the boot cover off, you can see I've started making an attempt at alley taping the floor. You've got to do this as part of race prep. There's got to be apparently a seal to stop there's no gap down to the fuel tank basically to stop fire. I'm not going to show you most of that because I've made a right pig's ear of it and it looks horrible. I don't know whether anyone does it neat, but I certainly didn't. I don't know yet what to do about the back about where you have to, how far around you actually have to seal it, whether it's literally continuously all around the edge of the boot, because the fire extinguisher obviously gets in the way, and there's an awkward holes and gaps to fill at this end of the boot. So I'm going to ask questions about that and see what we can come up with. As you may have spotted when we've been going around, I've got my roll cage padding on. Again, we haven't had any official instructions on this. The line is it's got to be put anywhere where your head could make contact. And they tell you helpfully that your head or your neck can stretch up to 8 inches in an accident, which is lovely, I thought. Anyway, I've looked at pictures of other cars, and this seems to be where most people put their lengths of padding. So the only one you might not have spotted is there's one down here. This is actually meant, I think, more for people who don't have the tillet seat and go with a bag seat. I mean, I'm thinking eventually I am going to go with a bag seat, so I decided I'd put that one on at the same time. And I've just duct taped it on, basically. You can it's got a sticky inside which you can use to tack it to the roll bar, and then just wrap it in duct tape to actually seat it home and make sure it's nice and solid, doesn't move anywhere. If you've got a hood or a half hood, you could carefully choose your angles for all these bits to make sure that your hood will still go over. Apparently it's all still possible even with the full factory hood. It's possible to do. You'll have to work it. You have to do a little cutout into this piece as well to make it angled correctly for you. I've heard it's possible. People say it's not. Some people say it is. Apparently warming up your hood helps because it keeps it nice and large, and eventually it will just stretch over time. I'll have a quick look at the cockpit because I readjusted the leg straps from the 6-point harness. The 2 leg straps, I went and actually adjusted them to roughly, or to where I need them to be. And the easiest way I found to do that was to pull them out the back. I say the easiest way, there's no easy way again. I pulled them out to behind the seat, adjusted them the best I could, made sure I put the lock back over the buckle. I say lock, you reverse the strap on itself to lock it in place. And then you do your best again to poke it back through, and eventually you can get your hand through the hole and you can pull them out, but it's pain. They do need quite a lot of adjusting. In their default factory supplied length, they're far too long. The little booklet we got from the seminar does a good job of explaining how they should look when they're attached to you. I've also spent a fair bit of time today plumbing in my V-box. So there's the LCD display. So I've used some click tape. So that's really quite strong it's strong Velcro-like stuff. Let me just, you can hear why it's called click tape. So I've got 2 little patches of it underneath, and I've got a long of it on the dashboard, and the 2 just snap together like that into a nice solid connection that's not going anywhere during a race. And I've used a few little bits of tape here to make a little bracket just to hold the wire as it goes down. It's hard to see in this light, I'll see if but I've attached down here, again it's hard to see, there's 2 strips of Velcro here. The fluffy side I've put onto the thing. I used a bit of brake cleaner to clean the top of the centre console, and these strips go down onto the metal. So I cleaned all this off, and they made a really good contact, and they're really nicely stuck down, which is what you need, because I've got on the back of the V-box itself, I've got the hook side. There you go. Make sure you make a note of your serial number before you cover it all in sticky stuff, and that can then sit stuck down in here. So yeah, so during the race that's not going anywhere. I rang up VBox because they're now offering a specific connection for Caterhams. And basically they supply you a power lead which connects to the fan button. There's an empty socket, and I found mine up here, so basically above the keys. There was an empty socket in there, and basically it just attaches in there, and when the ignition's on you just flick the fan switch and then the V-Box comes to life. So that's a really nice way of making sure that the battery remains isolated, because this is this side of the dashboard. You don't have to attach anything to your battery to actually get power in here. I think it cost about £28 delivered, that wire, so it ain't cheap. You could do it yourself if you had the right connectors, and I'm sure many people would, but for me it was just an easy solution just to go and buy it. So I did that, and I'm happy with all my plumbing for that. So that all sits there. It's just I've got my GPS up here, sat on the roll cage. Now I've heard that actually this isn't necessarily the best thing for the GPS, because it doesn't make a good enough metal base for it to sort of pick up a signal from. However, in the 2 track days I've had, it's had no problems where it is there. So I'm going to leave it there and maybe move it later. A lot of the professional fits actually sort of sit it onto the bodywork there. There's enough space underneath the ceiling there to actually poke the GPS wire. It's only a thin wire. I'm also, here's my other camera feed, so the camera will sit under here looking through the windscreen, and then the feed can come along here. I've left enough slack to enable me to have a long acre rear view mirror, which is a fairly sizable rear view mirror, which will eventually sit here. So I've given myself slack to enable me to move this mount further across when I need to, into the centre of the car. And I've just routed those 2 wires down using some cable ties along here, and then up underneath the dashboard. So they then trail out all the way under here, across and track towards the V-Box. I've made quite a lot of use of, again it's hard to see, but here's where all the wires are coming into the cabin from underneath from the engine bay, and I've used cable ties around that clump of wires, along with and sort of, well, just done as good a job as I can of just keeping all the wires for the V-Box sat behind there, with enough room to pull the V-Box forward, as you saw initially, to attach all the wires when you're setting up for the day. And then the driver camera, I've just put the mounting there, so that's just pointing down so you can see the steering, because with the camera at the front here you can't see the driver, and when you're doing your training and you've got your instructor on board, it's a good thing to be able to, so he can see how you're driving, or she can see how you're driving. So that was pretty much how I plumbed in my V-Box. Did take a while to get everything got everything in, and me happy with it, but I'm pretty pleased with how it turned out in the end. The final bit of the puzzle I've done so far is the head restraint mount, basically. So you can see it sitting there between the 2 roll bar brackets. So again, you get all the bolts and stuff supplied as part of your kit, and it does explain in the main manual how to fit it, so it's actually quite a good explanation. And there you can see it's going towards the back of the headrest. So if you haven't got a headrest, then this is where it sits just behind your helmet, or you leave a little tiny gap, but basically you leave a little gap here, but basically that sits up against your headrest to offer it support in just in case you have a bump or worse. If you have your seat a long way forward, then there's not enough studding left. There's not enough studding to actually have it right up against your seat. Apparently you then add padding to the front of this square mount here, so that it fills the gap. Maybe some expanding foam, builder's foam or something on there, and then gaffer tape over the top to fill the gap between your seat and the headrest. And I think that's about it. I'm sure I'll remember bits that need to be done still, but we're not far off. I've got to finish off the boot, but that would be the major aspects of getting it race prepped, I think. No doubt I will come back with other bits that I've forgotten later.